And I think we'll begin with Alan Hoban to introduce the SQUIDEP process and governance. When you're ready.
Great. Thanks very much, Andrew. The first thing I'd just like to say is that while Darren and I are presenting today, the SQUIDEP is actually the culmination of up to 10 years of work in Australia around this topic. So there are too many people involved in the history of this to name individually, but it's been very much a collective effort over a number of years. I'd like to start with the SQUIDEP intent and be really clear on why we're doing this. The intent is to provide greater certainty and considerable time and cost savings for the industry. We're looking to assist stormwater designers make better informed decisions when selecting stormwater treatment measures and to help development assessment staff assess the veracity of performance claims. And importantly, we also want to stimulate innovation in the sector so that we encourage people to be able to invest the money necessary to bring new products to market. The SQUIDEP, importantly, is seeking to provide excellence and best practice. But as we'll talk through some of the complexities of this, there's a lot of trade-off required. And so we're seeking excellence rather than perfection. One point I'd just like to make, I guess there's another big picture issue in relation to SQUIDEP, is this has really come about because the stormwater industry in Australia has gone through a major evolution over the last 20 years. About 20 years ago, diffuse urban stormwater pollution wasn't something that needed to be managed by most jurisdictions. And as we learnt more and more about vegetated treatment systems and wetlands and biofilters, we brought in place performance standards that were really aimed at helping people design and specify those vegetated systems. And we had gross pollutant traps as another category in the market. But then, given that regulatory change, it created a driver in the market for people to bring other products to the market that could meet performance standards and achieve pollutant gains in relation to nitrogen and phosphorus and total suspended solids. And in fact, the proprietary devices were then operating in the space of tertiary treatment. And it's created a lot of confusion in the industry because we haven't had a way to give people confidence about how well these devices are performed. And that's created a lot of frustration through different parts of the market. So that sort of sets the context for bringing in place SQUIDEP and giving people some clarity about how well proprietary devices perform. As we'll talk about in a little bit more detail through the basis conversation, SQUIDEP is not intending to say what treatment devices people should use. It's not intended to say proprietary devices are better or worse than vegetated systems. It's just meant to give people transparency in the data and help people understand performance claims around those products so that they can then make decisions about the best selection of technology. Okay, a bit of history. I'm sort of starting midway on the history here, but there was some earlier work many of you might be aware of dating back to the early 2000s. There was a CSIRO review back in 2010 starting to look at these issues. In 2013, Yuri Weissman produced a roadmap. This was some work that Melbourne Water commissioned in collaboration with the Institute of Public Works Engineers, where they started to have a look at how you might go about forming a certification scheme. In 2014, Stormwater Australia, under the sort of direction of its members, really took up the mantle on this and established an advisory committee and produced a really early consultation draft that was published through all Stormwater Australia communications channels. There was an advisory group that was established called the SQUIDEP. I think the acronyms in this space are something that if we had the benefit of hindsight, we might have changed some of the terminology. But the SQUIDEP, the Stormwater Quality Improvement Device Evaluation Committee, then worked through a fairly extensive consultation process over a number of years, with revisions being released and discussed nationally, both at national conferences and promoted through Stormwater Australia bulletins. It was advancing pretty well as it was getting closer to something that people felt was a substantial document and a well-resolved draft. A couple of the peak regulators, particularly Melbourne Water in New South Wales, sought to have an independent review commission to make sure that it was reflecting best practice. That review was done by Water Research Australia. It also gets called the Swinburne University Review. That review came through and recommended a number of key improvements to the protocol after benchmarking against a lot of the practices in New Zealand and in the USA. The vast majority of those changes recommended by Swinburne were reflected in the current protocol. There was one item that Swinburne thought needed to be in the protocol for it to be a best practice protocol, and that was laboratory testing. And we'll talk a little bit more about that and why that's not in the current field testing protocol. And incorporating lab testing is something we hope to do in about possibly at the 12-month review. It's a really complex issue, which is why it doesn't get included in this current version. And field testing was still considered to be the gold standard and the best way to get confidence in performance results. From that point moving forward, there was a number of final edits that occurred through 2018 in consultation with the SQIDEP. They were again put out to the national membership of Stormwater Australia for comment, and thanks to everyone who provided comments in relation to that draft. And that all comment resulted in a release in December of last year, possibly due to some Christmas headaches, too many Christmas parties. We, in January, with a bit of sober reading, realised there were a few typos and minor corrections, and so they were updated in early 2019. And that's a version that you can see on the Stormwater Australia website now. The next step on that was, in fact, I should jump back one slide, was that last year earlier this year, we've put out an expression of interest for the auditors. And the governance arrangements are a really important part of the SQIDEP framework. We think it's really important that people are able to understand what those governance arrangements are, and it's been something we've been working on busily behind the scenes, and we can talk a bit more about that today.